Hey, good morning garden friends. Welcome back. I hope you're doing great. I've got a good little episode for you today. We're talking all about moss poles, how to build your own moss poles. If you're not sure what a moss pole is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a pole made of moss. Right here we have some sphagnum moss. We've also got some coconut core here, a little mat that we've got cut up. And so when you're making your moss poles, you're actually making it for your house plants. So check this out. So, you know, a lot of our house plants are tropicals that we grow indoors. They sometimes like to kind of spill over and climb up things. In nature, they'll be climbing up trees and rocks and other plants to try to get to the sunlight. But in our home, they like to just kind of crawl out and hang down. But for sometimes, it's nice to really, actually for some people, they enjoy training these climbers upwards, vertically. And so with moss poles, it's a great way to show off a house plant that you have that would normally be growing out and down. I know at my house, I'm kind of running out of space where I can actually hang house plants down. So it's nice to be able to have some of these beautiful plants that would do that naturally, but train them up vertically because this nice column of foliage, that's the leaves, right? And so and then it'll spill over and you can maintain it and take cuttings. But then it just kind of forces that climber to climb up and do what it actually loves to do. You just give it a little support. So in today's video, we're gonna show off and kind of talk about the expense, how much it costs, the materials that it takes to build a moss pole, and then the steps that it requires to actually make that come to a reality. I do believe you can make these many different ways. We actually made these several different ways, and I'll go over that in this video. But really, we have two main categories. One that utilizes this coconut core mat that you see for baskets, basket liner typically. And then we have this sphagnum moss style. We use this hardware cloth, this metal mesh screen right here. I think some people you'll see maybe will use like a plastic mesh to surround their pole. Other styles, we don't use this at all, and we'll use just twine with the coconut mats. Like I said, we'll go over it all in the video, but really quick, let me show you how these ones turned out. All right, garden friends, so as I mentioned, some of the materials you need. So this is some hardware mesh wire. Comes in different varieties. You can even get the fancy stuff if you don't want it bare metal. You can get stuff that's coated. It just costs quite a bit more. Like I said, you can also go plastic, but we're actually going to strive to try to make as many different prototypes as we can, so that way we can see which style works best for us. We're going to do some experimentation with these as they grow to see which ones actually grow the best and which ones we just like to look at the most. So you can see here there are some differences. This one has the coconut core with the smooth side out. And you can see the one behind it we did very similarly, but it has the rough side out. So you'll notice this coconut mat has a kind of a rougher side where it's a little bit more fibrous, and on the other side it's a bit more smooth. So we did one of each. They do look a little bit different, but I wonder if it'll have a difference in the way that the plant's aerial roots can attach. You can see even this pothos right here is starting to form these small little aerial roots. So I have a hypothesis that maybe the rougher one might allow those roots to grab in a little better, but the smooth side looks pretty good. Now here's a very traditional moss pole. I've seen a lot of folks have these. We use obviously that they call it hardware cloth, even though it's not cloth. It's quite firm, but you can play with it and bend it. It's really easy to work with. It just takes you just got to snip it into shape. What we did is we actually centered ours around. We had some left over. Let me see if I have one here. So for the poles of all ours, we use a PVC center. So they've all have a PVC pipe in the center. I think you can use different sizes if you want, but this is just the size we had. I think this is 1 inch in diameter, but we had a bunch of just spare pieces. So for us, it was great. I've seen some folks make these with a center core that is maybe like a bamboo stake or a redwood stake, and I think those are great choices as well. We'll probably end up making some with those because I'd really like to be able to make an entire moss pole with just plant material where there's no plastic involved. You can see right here, this one uses metal, and it also gets clipped together with zip ties, right? And then even the plant gets held up with vinyl tape, and that works really well. It's actually, I think it's going to work great for us. But I'm kind of excited to see if we can experiment with making different moss poles with different materials that require less plastic. Luckily, like I said, the plastic we used in this, as far as the pipe is concerned, was destined for the scrap heap, but now it's inside here. So whether you're using like a bamboo stake or small metal rod or even like a wood stake, like we mentioned, might be a good choice. You need something down that center, and we'll show you how to make that in a second. I just want to show some of these off. And of course, we made a nice big one for our monstera here. You can see its roots are already sticking out. This plant had already been planted in here, so we're gonna try to train it along that as the best we can, but it will take a bit of effort, but I think we're up for the challenge. Like I said, we got some zip ties, we got some vinyl tie tapes. We were experimenting with different natural fiber twines. This is some sizzle twine. We got some jute twine. We've even got some manila rope. It's a nice looking thicker rope to play with. So it's a fun little project. Let's get right to it. So I got a few materials ready. I think I'm gonna show you two examples of the two main types that we do. I'm gonna do a really large moss pole with actual sphagnum moss that you can see right here. I actually like to pre-soak it a little bit because it's really dry and it comes a little bit compacted, so as you get it moistened, it's a little easier to work with. It's not nearly as dusty, and some of those materials are able to loosen and come apart, so it'd just be a little bit easier to work with. Now, looking at how since I decided to do such a large pole, I'm probably gonna end up having to open another bag of this green moss, but that's okay. We'll soak that as well. But I wanna show you what I got going here. So, like I mentioned, we had some PVC pipes, some old irrigation pipe, kind of lying about, and had no use for a few of these scrap pieces. So we decided to use them, and so I measured it, and so like I said, this is gonna be a large one, and so what it is you really want to have at least, you know, maybe like 6 to 8 inches as on the bottom, so that way, because what you're gonna do is you're actually gonna use it as a stake to go into that soil. So you need some space in your pole that's actually gonna go into the dirt, and then the top portion is what you're gonna allow to have that cage and all the moss around it. So essentially, you have to measure that ahead of time. We have this wire mesh here, so I measured that out. So it'll go all the way to the top of that pole, and then leave me quite enough space for this to be stabbed into the soil, because we're gonna use this on a very large houseplant that we have growing in a pretty large pot, a large leaf monstera. It's a pretty mature little monstera, and it's actually just taken off, and it's starting to kind of flop over out of its pot even, and so we're gonna have some fun with it, just like the one we have over here to my right off screen. We're gonna build another big one, so let's get started. Once you have your PVC cut, we actually just cut it with a little hacksaw. You can cut it many different ways, but don't ever use, don't use your loppers or pruners. Use a pipe cutter if you can, or a blade designed for it. I pre-cut this to my measure, so you just measure it to the width and length you need. But the big trick is with these is when you cut them, they leave a lot of little sharp dangles, so you want to get in there and snip those back or grind them down the best you can so they're not stabbing you as you work. Once you kind of got that figured out, just kind of bend it over. We're gonna make like a little kind of semi-circular little open cylinder here. So we want to just kind of start that bending process, because when we're done, it's gonna create a nice little cage around this pipe, giving it maybe like an inch or so on each side. You don't need the moss pole to be massively wide, but with that said, I also don't want it to be just completely tight around this pole, because we want to get a nice layer of mulch in there. So the first thing I do is I kind of work this around and I play with it a little bit, so that way I can get it to, you kind of just bend it to your shape. That's why this hardware cloth is nice. It actually does kind of bend like cloth a little bit, just pokier than most cloth. You can even deform it and make it not to the shape you want. Just flatten it a little bit and then open it right back up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna toss in our greenery here, our green moss. So we're gonna just take handfuls of this, kind of shake off some of that excess moisture. We're gonna make a big muddy mess. So wherever you do this, make sure you can make a bit of a mess. Luckily, I've got concrete floors and wonderfully hardworking students to help me clean up afterwards. So I'm just gonna it's kind of like making a nice little taco or burrito with some greenery here. You just kind of fill it up like you're adding in that taco meat or your favorite filling. And so we're gonna add some into here, and it's gonna be great. Just need to add a little bit in, then I'm gonna lay that pipe right back down on top of that greenery, and then we'll surround that pipe with some more sphagnum moss. So I'm just gonna set it in there. If the pipe moves about and slides around right now, not a big deal. It's just in there to give this whole thing a little bit of support towards the end. It's kind of fun to just fill this up, to be honest. It's quite satisfying. This moss smells really good. We were commenting yesterday how it's once you get it wet, it smells almost like you're walking through a really moist forest right after a rain or something. It just has this wonderful fragrance to it. It just reminds me of being out in nature after a nice cool rain, getting out maybe like in a northern forest. Here in California, we have some up the coast that are pretty nice and kind of remind me of this wonderfully moist vegetative smell. You get all this wet moss, it just smells so good. And so I'm just gonna kind of pack it in there. Like I said, this pole is probably gonna be one of our larger ones. You don't have to make them this large. This is like a, for the video, it just worked out that we're making this big one right here, but maybe in our next one, I'll do a smaller one because a lot of folks at home don't need a 3-foot pole. But in this case, it's actually gonna be quite useful to us. And I think I had just enough moss, but I may have to moisten some more to finish it off. But here's what we're gonna do now. This is actually a pretty simple process. That's why I like doing this so much. And it actually helps if you have a student or a friend with you, a garden friend, because sometimes to get it figured out, if you have multiple hands on deck, it just works out really good. Oh, so I'm just gonna deform this back a little bit, so it's getting a little too flat for me. But what I like to have is I wanna have at least 2, maybe even 3 rows overlapped. And what I mean by that are the rows of this metal on each side. So the bottom lip, that bottom layer is gonna go under at least 3 rows, and the top layer is gonna fold over 3 rows. It likes to kind of get sideways sometimes. So what I like to do is do my best to position it where it's even, and then I'll actually utilize these little handy dandy zip ties. This is where a little bit of plastic comes in, right? So that's maybe in our future ones, we'll try to design this with less plastic needed. But for now, this actually works great. I'm just gonna set this up and zip tie them in, and that's simple enough. You know how to use a zip tie. You just push it where you want it. Oh, I'm gonna go this direction actually. That might be better for me. And it'll come right up. Oh, there we go. Brilliant. And these are some pretty small zip ties. You might find it might be easier to have a little bit bigger ones, but for me, I didn't want to waste too much plastic. So we're actually just gonna use several of them going down. Like I said, it's nice to have it even as you go. You don't want the metal getting off track. So it's nice it's all squared up. So if you follow those squares, typically you're gonna be pretty happy with the result. And so it's one thing after another. You're gonna zip tie them down. The bigger your pole ends, taller it is, probably the more zip ties you may need to use. Some of the smaller ones we made yesterday, some of them only needed 4. Maybe a little larger ones might need 5 or 6 or 7, depending upon how long you go. But for me, it's about, about 4 inches apart or so. It's really gonna depend on your situation, how many you like to use. You could even substitute these zip ties with maybe some wire ties if they're strong enough. The metal on metal would probably be fine, and the metal, if it's good tie, it'll last long. But in this case, these zip ties are just so dang useful, and I try to get them nice and snug. And like I said, and use as many as I need. These are just little tiny 4 inches or 4 inches are real thin, but I think they're gonna do the trick for us. I love hearing that little click as you slide them down and snap them into place. And when we're done, we'll come through and we'll snip all those little tabs, all those longer tabs off, because nobody wants to see that. We want them to be hidden in there, looking real nice. I'm getting my feet are already getting wet. Yesterday, we made a few prototypes, and I realized, oh yeah, this is a great way to soak your feet all day. See, I said wet feet all day yesterday. That was great, and I can feel like I'm on path to have that same day again, but that's okay. I'll take the wet feet and having cool moss poles any day. So just a few more zip ties. Maybe I'll edit some of this out, but let's see if I can't finish this off. Not bad. I might have to put one more zip tie in here just for good measure. At this point, we came this far, didn't we? There we go. Booyah! If you feel like you need to zip tie any areas that you didn't, you can go back and hit those up a little bit. This is when I like to reform this guy, but look at that. That turned out real nice. Like I said, I might have to actually put a little bit more moss in there. So let's finish this off another angle. The moss poles turned out great. I think it's time to install it. I have this, like I said, I got this great Monstera here, and I want to train it, and so we got to get a pole up its back here. And so I'm just going to make a little bit of space for it. We can move some of the soil around. You don't need to dig all the way to the bottom, although maybe you do if it's really root bound. You can't get in there. You might have to make some space for your stake to stab through and dive through that soil. But for us, I think we're gonna be okay. I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm just trying to make a little bit of room back in here, so that way this hole is pretty big. And so we're gonna try to stab it in there, and we're gonna train this Monstera up so you can see what it looks like when it's all done. There's that beautiful moss pole we just made. And so let's see if we can't get it in there. Holy smokes. Okay, ooh, that one's Oh man, it's in there. Woo-wee, that's a good one. Oh man. Woo, okay, that one's pretty decent. It's in there. I'm gonna backfill some of that soil back to where it belongs. Get this moss pole right where it belongs. There it goes. And so now it's time to just tie this beauty up and we'll show you the finished product. So here we go. Let's get this dirt back in there. Yeah, this is a good time to fertilize if you haven't. You know, check for any bugs. If, you can already see the aerial roots are going nuts on this one. If some of them are kind of in the way or too long, you can snip them out if needed. Pretty soon, hopefully they'll be stabbing into this and grabbing onto your pole, because that would be pretty dang cool. If you need to add more soil at this time, this is also a great time to do that, top off any fresh soil that's needed. But there we go, that's a start. And I might even have to hammer this pipe in just a little bit more. But that's it. We're actually gonna use, let's see, we'll use our jute twine on this one. Let's test out some jute twine. That'll be great. Oh. All right, so we were able to get our twine. We're gonna wrap our twine all the way around this pole, and that's gonna tie this coconut fabric to this pole. It's gonna be great. So keep on going, bud. Here, I'll hold the top of it for you. We're gonna be pulling it really tight. We've already tied it at both ends to kind of hold it in place and get those overlaps started. But now we're gonna be wrapping it with a nice tight spiral of this sizzle twine, this biodegradable, you know, plant-based twine, and it's just gonna be a nice way to hold that coconut core mat onto this pole, so that way it doesn't move around. Doesn't have to be perfect. Looking really good already. Loving it. All right, so now it's time to, now you see how that looks? Woo, it's like a sweet little candy cane from nature. I'm gonna cut some of this off. I'm gonna leave you a bunch, and then you're gonna go ahead and just tie that off at the end the best you can. Nice little double knot. Yep, oh yeah, give itself a little gap and then tie it off the best you can. And that's gonna be fantastic. You can see that we did the rough side out on this coconut mat, this coconut core, and so I think that'll be a little bit better for those roots to grab onto the material, the smooth side. Although it looks really nice, just might not provide enough you know, surface friction, you know, or loose material for those roots to really dive into. So we'll find out though. And so this is a different variety than the sphagnum moss based one. This one just used coconut core mat. People use this mat, you can buy it by the foot at the nursery. I think it's like $5 a foot, linear foot. And I do believe it's a 2 foot wide section. All right, that's perfect. You did a great job, sir. And so now it's time to go add this beauty into a plant, and then we'll show you how we tie that plant up there to train it. Let's go do it. Well, that about does it, garden friends. I hope you liked the video. I hope you enjoyed the finished product. Here's a look at what we just finished. This is our newest pole. We put some nice little pothos up that pole. We'll see if we can't get her to grow up this beautiful, beautiful moss pole. Then, like I said, we made this one with the coconut core mat. And then, of course, the first one we built in this video utilized this green moss with some hardware cloth, that metal mesh cage there. Right, and we utilized some old PVC pipe as the heart of the stake to hold it up, but of course you could utilize bamboo, like even this one we used a little green piece of bamboo to kind of straighten it out, because it's not perfectly straight, so we'll have to have some fun with that, and obviously water these in to get them settled out over time. But you can see it turned out really nice, very simple. This one we tried not to use any plastic in it other than the pipe on the inside, so you can see we've got that nice sizzle twine on there, so everything's biodegradable. And then here you can see there's the other one that we